All right, let's get into the rest of Chapter 13, starting this time around with talking about the actual reading of the news and reporting. Broadcast speech as a production value. So these are the things that we're going to highlight in this particular section. These all add to a station's sound, the way that you present the news, the voice, the attitude, all those sort of things. They help to kind of create that image of a station. So, if we're talking about a news station versus a music station that has a news element with it, for example. Inflection and tone are as eloquent as the choice of words. So this is what we mean when we talk about putting a certain attitude or feel to how you present the news. The way that you say words, the way that you emphasize different words, the pace of the delivery. Are you delivering a story quickly because there's a sense of urgency or importance, or that you're on a fast-paced sort of station? Or is it delivered slow in order to make sure the listener gets the details of the information? The quality and style of the ad-lib type of report filed by journalists in the field. That is also going to be an important aspect. Is there a deliberateness into the word choice that is used, or is it delivered in a more conversational type of style, or is it delivered in such a way that there wasn't time to actually write the words of the story together because things are happening in the moment and the news reporter is actually searching for the right words to say? That can also lend to the feel of a way that a news story is delivered and received. When it comes to news and public affairs programming, well, let's talk about the difference between public affairs programming and public service announcements. Public affairs programming differs from news in that it is less immediate. It's usually going to be directed towards a specific topic. It's going to be examined at greater length than in a news report. Many times public affairs shows on both TV and radio, you can expect them usually to be around 30 minutes long. So it takes a deeper dive into a particular topic for discussion. Meanwhile, public service announcements, or PSAs, they're going to be short announcements similar in structure to commercials. And these are usually things that are given free of cost to various nonprofit organizations to talk about the organization or its cause, perhaps an event that a nonprofit organization is doing. So there's kind of that difference in expectation between taking a deep dive into a topic or issue versus a quick bit of information about an organization or an event. Now, the newscast, content and structure of local newscasts. The first one that you may encounter is exclusively local news. You'll find this a lot on all news stations. You'll also find this on smaller stations that have a news element within their regular programming. You may also find local news with wire copy, providing state, national, and international news. Now, when we talk about wire services provide special feeds to broadcast outlets, and this can be all sorts of different types of material. Some wire services will provide a news summary where you can click on just one particular item within the wire service tool, and it gives you the latest headlines either from around the nation or around the world. Sometimes it's regional that you can look up those things, or you can find headlines where there's just one or two sentences per story. You can also find different types of news in different categories like business reports, stocks, sports, weather, entertainment. Even commentaries are available on some wire services. Some wire services have active participation by affiliates to provide state and regional news. These are kind of these consortiums where a station may not only subscribe to a service, but they're also a contributor to that service, so that the news that they upload from their local area can be used by other stations in other markets. To use a wire service effectively, you want to acquaint yourself with the schedules and workings of the service. So learn about the schedule of the service's offerings. When do they put out various summaries of different types of news? Can you find the latest national headlines at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m.? When do they come out with the stock market reports? Do they do it on an hourly basis? Do they offer futures before the opening bell? When can you expect closing bell reports and analysis and things like that? No matter what the type of content it is, usually wire services are going to have various deadlines within the organization as to when they're going to have certain types of content available. The wire services provide working manuals, pronunciation guides, other descriptive literature that can be very helpful. Many times those pronouncers will be included within a story that you pull from the wire service to help you. So these services are very much kind of the background news person that helps the person putting together the newscast for the local station. Check copy for typos and pronunciation problems. Typos and garbled copy happen on occasion. You don't want to find out about it when you're in the middle of reading a story live on the air. Computer issues happen. The fact that people are putting these stories in under deadlines, sometimes, the keystrokes get away from them. We're all human. It happens. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those things and get a chance to pre-read your copy before going live with your copy, not just for grammatical errors, but also making sure that the story itself is accurate. Sometimes there might be, usually unintentionally, but you might find that there's some inaccuracies in the story itself. You always want to verify the time of transmission as well. Make sure that an old and dated story doesn't get included in copy that's scheduled to go on the air. Again, news is going to be timely, so you want to have the freshest information possible. When you're dealing with networked audio, and in addition to copy from wire services, some wire services do provide that pre-recorded audio, various sound bites, actualities, sometimes full-blown reports that you can use within your newscast. The recorded audio is usually going to be slated with a billboard. It'll describe the piece, tell the length of the piece, and many times, you don't see this too much today, especially with wire services being more and more online. But again, this is where you want to know what your wire service does. They might have a slate at the beginning of the audio piece that says, okay, this is President Biden talking at the White House on January 19th, and it's coming your way in 3, 2, 1. Obviously, you don't want to have that slate air as a part of your newscast, so be mindful of how the wire service provides audio to you. Now, talk shows. Some common forms of talk shows include the one-on-one, where an interviewer and a guest discuss a topic. There's also the panel discussion, and this features a moderator and several participants. When you're dealing with a discussion involving multiple people, it's going to be important that the producer or moderator identifies each speaker frequently during the program. Keep in mind, this is radio. We don't have the visual to go along with the voice, and sometimes, especially if you're talking with someone that may not be well known, it's helpful to regularly recap that you are talking to so-and-so, and he or she holds this particular person, this particular position, and that is why we are speaking to that person. You also want to try to avoid, whenever possible, having 2 or more people speak at the same time. Not only is it rude, but it makes it difficult for the listener to kind of parse who is saying what. The call-in show is a talk program designed to include the listening audience. Often it's presented around a previously announced topic of discussion, but sometimes listeners will call in and speak about whatever's on their minds, kind of an open forum type of show. You have both. Open forums tend to usually happen more so on local talk shows, but they do happen on national talk shows as well. But generally there's going to be some sort of theme. The host of the talk show will introduce a topic. Maybe there'll be a short interview with somebody that is related to that particular topic, and then the phone lines get opened up for listeners to call in and ask questions or share what is on their minds. What's on listeners' minds might not always be suitable for airing, so they do at most radio stations that allow for call-in talk shows. At least if they're smart, they'll have a delay system. The program will be recorded live and fed back over the air several seconds later using that device. It kind of think of it like an old portable CD player where, the CD starts spinning, but maybe it spins for 10 seconds before you actually start to hear audio. So there's a buffer in there whenever you hit a bump on the roadway or something like that, so that you can continue to listen to your audio without it being interrupted. You can kind of think of a delay system in the same sort of way, to the point where, if a producer is paying attention and they catch somebody on the phone saying a cuss word or something like that, they can cut off the caller, hang up on them, and then also push the dump button on the delay system to make sure that that audio does not get out over the air. Producers of call-in shows will often screen calls in advance, partly to try to mitigate those possibilities of someone they think might not be suitable for the broadcast airwaves in that way, but also weeding out the crank calls and making sure that people that call in are going to stay on point with the discussion that is at hand, staying on topic. Some production techniques for news and public affairs. In the interviewing aspect, when you're a talent interviewing somebody, make sure you ask simple and direct questions. You're going to put yourself in the place of the listener and determine what the listener would like to ask. You don't really want to ask long questions. You want to keep things short and simple, but you also want to ask intriguing questions that will pique the listener's interest. And you want to invite bite-sized answers, but you also don't want to ask yes or no questions. You want to make it so that it is a conversation, it's a dialogue. You don't want to necessarily put yourself in the position where you ask a question of somebody and then they wind up giving kind of an essay-length answer, because the more one particular person talks, the less interesting it becomes for the listener. Ask follow-up questions. It's important to pursue a line of questioning if an interesting conversation develops. You want to formulate questions on the basis of previous answers. In other words, mimic a normal conversation. Pay attention to the response of questions that's being asked, and then pick up on that and continue the discussion. There is nothing that is less interesting than someone giving a thoughtful response to a question and then the host saying, "Oh, that's cool," or "Oh, that's interesting," and then starting off with another question that has absolutely nothing to do with what was just being said. Remember to regularly fill listeners in. The producer, the moderator, should frequently mention the names of the guest and identify the topic throughout the course of the conversation. You never know at what point a listener may have tuned in and not caught the introduction. So you want to continually refresh and say, "This is so-and-so from so-and-so, and we're talking about such and such." When editing a story or an actuality, first off, editing is going to allow you to inject some variety, because you can take different pieces of interview segments, rearrange the actualities, and then rewrite the stories around them. And in addition to offering variety, editing the actualities is going to allow you to shape the story to be told in the quickest and most succinct way possible. So this allows you, if there's a lull in the action, for example, you can take that out and piece together the sound of what's happening and interject with the reporter, with an interview that happened on the scene, those sorts of things. And you don't even necessarily have to keep things in time order, as long as you're creating some sort of perspective that helps people understand what really happened over the course of an event. When using sound sources in radio news production, those sound bites can really dress up a news story. You want to try to have local noise if you can, because it makes the story more immediate for the listener. It places them in the scene and allows you to kind of use that sense, again, of being in the moment. When you use the telephone for news reporting, well, a couple of things here. First off, cell phones in the field can make remote reporting really easy. Either the reporter calls in and dials in the studio telephone line and calls in that way. Nowadays, there's also ways to do it via the internet that are much stronger and better quality than what we've had in the past. Phone calls to newsmakers or celebrities from the studio can make those people more available, and many times they're going to be amenable to talking with you to be able to reach your audience. Now, one thing to keep in mind though, in most states you have to inform everybody involved in a conversation that a recording is being made. If you don't do that, you can get yourself and your radio station in significant legal trouble. Know the laws of your state. Some states only require that one person be consensual when it comes to a recording. Other states require all parties to be consensual. So if you are doing something that's going to be for an interstate audience, it is best to make sure that everybody is aware that the recording is going to happen. And even if it's not a legal requirement for what you're doing, it's really just good practice and good manners. Using modern news gathering technology. This modern technology has made it possible to have audio available immediately, to edit audio out in the field, to submit audio wirelessly, and to write stories from anywhere. The ability to have a tablet or a cell phone or a laptop available with you when you're out and about, as long as you've got access to some sort of internet source, it makes it really easy to have a remote studio. And the quality of things that you can take out and about with you is continually getting better and better and better. So at times quality isn't even an issue. Now let's look at the newscast as a whole. The elements of a story should follow logically, and the pace and style of delivery should be varied to reflect story content. So you want to make sure that how you deliver a story is going to be appropriate for kind of the significance of the story itself, whether it's a serious story, something that ought to be approached with a certain amount of reverence, or if there's a liveliness, a high energy sort of feel to what's going on. You want to try to convey that in the way that you tell a story. The newscast is an entire story in and of itself, and though the individual elements vary in content, the items should follow gracefully. What do we mean by that? You want to kind of have this sort of flow so that you're not, throughout the course of the newscast, having people follow along the stories and have all sorts of different emotions all over the place when you're going through the course of the newscast. You want to start with one emotion and then try to change emotions in such a way that it's gradual, change the tone, the seriousness, from one side to the other. Most times the important story, a serious story, is going to lead off, and things get lighter and lighter as you go on. But that's not necessarily how a newscast has to be put together. Again, consider your audience, consider the stories that you have to work with, and think about what the best flow is going to be. Within the newscast, you'll want to strive for completeness, I should say. Don't leave the listener hanging, waiting for an answer that never comes. Make sure every news story you have has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that there's a flow of thought, that they get the full sense of what the story is about. When it comes to being responsible, news people don't have to be stuffed shirts, but they do have to realize that they're in a serious business. Care, precision, and a commitment to truth and accuracy are going to be essential qualities of news people. It is not something that you want to take in a flippant, I don't care sort of way, because the stories that you're going to be telling people, some of those stories are going to be stories that people care about extremely, may be very passionate about. So you want to keep that in perspective and deliver that story in a way that your audience expects to receive it. That's going to do it for the news chapter. As always, make sure you submit your notes and your survey responses and your study questions. Now, we went through a lot in this chapter. It was a pretty hefty chapter with a lot of information. And maybe there's some things about the news that you hadn't thought about, or the intricacies that kind of go into a newscast. We'll get to play with some of that as we go through this particular chapter and some of the labs that we do. But bring your thoughts, bring your questions, bring what you think about the news, and maybe ways that news reporting could be better, especially when it comes to radio. And we'll talk about all of your thoughts when we get together for class.